Adam, who's not here. He's not here. Charles. Is Charles here?
No.
He's not here either. So I've got the message for the board preferences. So, any feedback from last week? Good, bad, and different? And tell me as it is, because I want to keep learning to be a better coach and a better teacher. Too aggressive last week? Okay, that's great. So, what do you think planning training cycles and monitoring training loads? What does that mean, do you think? Anybody? Coaches we are.
Managing people's, especially coming back from injury, managing their output to ensure that they don't re-injure said injury.
Yeah. And when we're talking about planning training cycles, what does that?
Yearly training schedule.
Yearly training schedule, periodisation. So we want to plan the year. What do we want to plan the year for?
So we're prepared.
So you're prepared, yeah. Yeah, and what did you learn last year on how do you start a periodisation program? Where do you work? Where do you start?
General.
Pardon?
General.
That's the first phase, but how do you start planning a periodisation program? And all I'm doing, I'm fishing with you because you should have done last year. And we've got to pick up on last year and get you fast track to this year. Yeah?
Testing with the athletes on currently.
Testing? No, that's one thing. What is a periodisation program? What would you describe it as?
What volumes and loads to use?
Volumes and loads, yeah. So, and then that's where I thought, and I prepared for it, I'm thinking how we were going last week and where we're going to this week. So, a periodisation program is a map. And it's a map used for everybody in the organisation. So to get into an elite organisation, you've got marketing people, you've got operations managers, you've got head coaches, you've got medical staff, and you've got your marketing staff, and then your wellbeing staff. So it's a map that we've got to share that makes it easy to identify what's happening this week, what's happening this month, what's happening in 6 weeks. And when you start planning the program, you've got to start at the back and work backwards. So you're planning, is your team good enough to make the grand finals? Well, I'm not sure. So you've got to talk to your boss. That's the other thing. Who do you talk to? Who else is involved in building a periodisation program? Who do we work for a strength and conditioning coaches or high performance managers? Pardon?
Players?
Head coaches.
The head coaches. That's where we answered the head coach. I just said earlier, I don't know if you're here, I've been sacked 3 times with them. But it hasn't been sacked by, you're sacked because you haven't done a good job. It's because I'm going, a new coach has come in. Because they go with their own coach. So when Anthony Griffin took over from Ivan Cleary at Penrith, he said, boy, and he got rid of 5 of us because we weren't part of his team that brings in. And that's what the head coach wants to do with his team. And then the high performance manager has got to reflect exactly what the coach wants. Because he's going to look after that physical stuff. And I'm going to go through some slides and sort of put some content around that statement. But I really wanted to emphasise to you, what is a periodisation program? And it's a document, it's a map for the whole organisation. Because they've got to plan things, elite stuff. They've got to plan travel, they've got to plan marketing, they've got to plan events around there, they've got sponsors that want to come in. So it's a whole big organisation. And again, I changed this because it's got that all in it. And I don't know why this is working here. Frustrations? Okay. And they're our learning outcomes. So we want to understand the requirements and the skills in long-term athletic development. Because we've got 35 staff, 35 players in our rugby team. And then a lot of you guys will be working with a lot of people. Also, we want to plan and implement an integrated year, training year, monitoring and includes seasonal periodisation, incorporating stages, physical compensations, competencies, variety of sub-elite, semi-professionals. There's a big whole array of it. And last week we went through that you've got to look at the physiological characteristics of your team. What are our 4 physical training qualities? Now, strength, power is a sub-quality, remember? And we've really got, again, it's kind of revision, but we've got strength. What else?
Speed.
Speed.
Flexibility.
Good.
Endurance.
And endurance. Yeah. They're our 4 physical qualities. And from there we've got sub-qualities. Yep. Strength is control, stability. Strength, endurance. Max hypertrophy. And then max strength and power. Yeah. And we need the training variables and to put some context around those outcomes. Cool? Speed. What are our sub-qualities of speed?
Agility.
Pardon?
Agility.
Agility.
Reaction.
Pardon? Reaction.
Acceleration.
Acceleration. Change of direction, max velocity. So these things are really important when we want it. Remember in the game of soccer, we want the goalie to be extremely powerful, strong, agility, reactive. Yeah. So, but with the midfielder, his primary is aerobic endurance, isn't it? So we've got to all individualise this stuff. So that's really important that we understand that. Okay, we also want to look at integrate an advanced level of understanding, just to understand the health and wellbeing considerations involved in monitoring external loads. What's an external load? Weights, yeah, or a 1.2 that we're supposed to do today, but we're pushing that back to week 5. Okay, when we've got the center of excellence up there. That's the external load that we apply. Yeah, or how much weight we're going to tell them to lift. And then we get internal responses. And we've got objective data. Objective data. What's our objective data?
Numbers, kilos.
Yeah, our response. Did we get the reps out? Did we do the GPS data? Measures our distances. Yeah, and our response. Our heart rates. That's a measure of our internal response to the external loads that we apply. And then what we do in the 1.2, if we get there in 5 minutes, which is 300 seconds, well, that tells us they've got 4 minutes per second that we went through. Remember we did that equation as well? So 5 minutes, 1.2k, 5 minutes is 300 seconds. It took us to run those 5 laps, and 300 into 1200 is 4 metres per second. So we're getting that response and we understand that side of things. Yep. And then we get subjective data. What's the subjective data?
How you feel? Questionnaire.
How you feel, questionnaire, and precisely what?
RPE, like
Rate of perceived exertion. And then if we have rate of perceived exertion, this is where we're going back to coaching now. If you don't like the coach, and you don't like the athlete doesn't like you, it's got to be an honesty system, doesn't it? So if we don't have a good relationship with you guys, we don't get honest feedback. And we can't rely on subjective data. And with the referees, they lie about their wellnesses because they're worried if they don't get enough hours sleep, the coaches aren't going to pick them for the referee. Or if they do bad in the 1.2, then they're going to use that against them when they don't get a game. So it's really competitive. So we're trying to work through that with them and start to build some trust. And they didn't trust the strength and conditioning coaches because they used to make them run up those pylons, that state of Australia, there'd be a roller waiting at the top. They'd have to do rowing on top of that. There was no functional training there for that. They don't run up on concrete, they don't use rowers, their average age is 39, so all we're doing is asking for injuries. And that was the response, so now we've got to be very careful. So all this is really important to understand that. And then we've really got to evaluate and synthesise the physiological, the psychological and the biomotor research in order to develop appropriate sport-specific stuff. So we need to have evidence-based research to apply our programs. Does that make any sense? Cool? I'm just looking at that wine glass you've got here. So, oh, sorry. No, that's... Yeah. No, it's not. It's just a bit of a joke.
Fine dining for you.
Pardon?
Fine dining.
Fine dining, an ACP. So here's as an example of an annual plan. So every week, what's happening? Week 1 to 52. Yeah? What are we doing here? We've got our month, dates, sub-phases, NRL training weeks, finals, competition, camps, anything we need there. And this is our schedule. What have we got going on? Okay, if there's something important there, we've got to put that in. So we get the dragon there. These are our loads that we expect. Hey, how you going? Good to see you, mate. You too. So see, these are RPEs that we want to get to, and that's why it's so important. And we're going to 2,200, we're building it up. If anybody looked at those presentations I sent this last week, you can see our running loads for our referees. Yeah, how we build them. 10,000 and then go on. Build, and then drop it down a bit. Build, and then we continue on with that. What else we've got to look for? We've got to look at musculoskeletal screenings. How often are we going to screen? Video analysis, skin folds, testing, all these different things that we want to look at, and how many days we're training a week. Just things that we can do by. Cool. There's a blink. More modern day one. What are we doing for strength? What are our major events? So generally we're going to work backwards there and you'll find out what's happening there. So if you're a heptathlete, you'd have nationals, state, and then you could work back from there where we've got to start peaking. So when we know when to peak, and we've got to practice that tapering as well. Yep. And then I've been thinking about the heptathlon and having different coaches and things like that. Is that normal for all athletes?
Not all.
Not all. Some have got. Okay, cool. Again, all this information here, and anyone not proficient in using Excel and hyperlinks and things like that, you probably want to think about trying to do it. These are all hyperlinked to other mesocycles and things like that. But that's similar to an annual plan. And then we determine who determines the periodisation, sports coach or the strength and conditioning coach. So these are some ideas here in closed cyclical class sports, running, swimming and things like that. It leaves the strength becomes a sports coach. So you have a coach and then but you've got 5 coaches, so yeah, it's or more. Very difficult. And then leaving it up to the strength and conditioning coach for your physiological and the biomotor qualities. Okay, in open skill sports, the strength and conditioning coach generally has more input from the planning, although there's a trend for coaches. So again, the high performance manager has got to replicate what the coach wants. But then we've got other stakeholders involved too. Our high performance team, as I'll show you in a couple of slides down. In both cases, the strength and conditioning coach has to determine which situation applies to them and with the sports coach. So every player's got to understand it. And then we've got to individualise it because our training principles, isn't it? It's long-term athletic development, so progressive overload. It's specialist, specific functions, and then it's also individualised, so everyone's different. So the planning process is a systematic one that integrates each of these. Knowing where your performance are now, knowing where the performance want to be. So we've got to have individual meetings with our players and athletes. Where do you want to be? What's your real expectations? It's really important. Have they got any injuries? And these are all in important areas. Knowing the time scale, understanding your knowledge base as a coach, and knowing how to prepare the plans and monitoring and evaluating the plans. We all start copying something. If you're involved in heptathlete, if you're copying something else, you look up Google Scholar, find a periodisation program, you might start there. Or work on the ones you've already got. Or if you're a speaker or things like that. If it's working, so again, I work with Abby. We always do what we always did, we always get what we always got. So we're trying to do isometrics, we're trying to do switching, we're trying to do eccentric training, we're just varying our sports psychologists. Anything we can to try to get that 0.02 a second. So that's really important. So this is a conceptual framework of processes for monitoring planning. And it's something that came up in the research that I did. But ideally, if we start here, so we're applying that external load. Yep, we've got to get skills, we've got to get strength, speed, endurance and flexibility. And we do all that. We predetermine their loads. We think about, after we do their testing, we sort of say, okay, this is what their loads are, this is how we're going to put them. Then we do the training on the game session. And then we monitor it. And the monitoring is individualised of the athlete and the internal response. So they put heart rate monitors on and they put the GPS units on. They go and do their training. You do it all the time. Anybody else use GPS for their training? You using GPS stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah,
my watch has a GPS.
Or your watch, your Garmin? Yeah. So you're going to get some sort of response. So we have to do that. Then what we look at there, we've got your micro technology, and then you've got your psychometric or your subjective data. So one thing is you get their distances and their speeds and their accels and their decels and all that information, and then you ask them what their RPE was. And then what happens there is then you've got to put the data in, and then you do your data analysis. So we've got a sports scientist that does that, and then he feeds it into what we've got is that Smartabase. Smartabase is a platform where you're feeding everything into it, and you're generating reports. So if there's any abnormalities, they'll pick it up, and then we start asking the athlete what's going on and if you're okay, as well as just talking to them every day. Then we generate a report out of it, and then we've got to interpret the data. So we do reports on something, and then we look at their wellnesses, somebody up there upset, because it's not only the physiological, but it's also the psychological information. They might have things going on at home. They might be late for training. Somebody might be sick. There's all these different things that have a major effect on people and athletes' perception. And if they see something on social media, that's really effective that we've got to interpret. On the other side, the coaches, they're looking at it, and the coaching staff have their observations. They're doing their video analysis and their reviews. And then the collaboration is between us and the coaches and the medical staff. We have to talk about it and what they think, and the coach's reflections and the decision outcomes, and all of a sudden he makes his final decision. You're in, you're out. And he makes those on that informed decision based on all this information that we provide him. And then that interpretation of the objective and subjective feedback by the high performance staff as well. So it's all going into that system, and that's where the coaches come up with it. So there's something similar with that. So again, we're looking at during the initial preparation period, your workloads builds up each month. So for us, with our officials, we've got low loads, medium loads and high loads, and where things should be. This isn't made up just this year. This has been over the last 4 years where we're building on it all the time, so it's a working document. And we try to use it. And then we're just stepping up. Week one's pretty low, build, similar to that periodisation thing we seen the other day. And they're just going up there with different camps and things that we've planned. So we know where we're at. So when you're looking at your periodisation training divisions, you have a multi-year plan for Olympic athletes, annual years, and you've got micro, macro cycles. It could be 7 months to a year. if you're a boxer or martial arts, you might have several macrocycles, and you've got your mesocycles, which are monthly, or it could be anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks. And again, and then you've got your microcycles, and then a training day, and then a training session. So it kind of fits it all in. Any questions or comments? Is it scary? So you want to look at some areas. What sort of your training periods? What do you want to put in as your training periods? And you can have your, we talk about general prep and specific prep, and then the competitions for soccer and rugby union and rugby league, those sort of sports. But you can call it whatever you like. Yep. Where do you think you're being? The whole idea is it gives you a definite period of how long you want to do your preparation, how long you want to get into specific training, and how long you want to do your competition is. And you want to plan for just a season and hope that you're going to make the semis, the playoffs, and then start another phase there if you possibly can. Again, that's got to deal with the coach. So if your division of training into different parts, your prep, your competition, and that's just a common one here. You've got your preparation and you've got your phases, general and specific, and then you've got your pre and your competitive, and then also your transitions 1 and 2, which might be the competition, it might be the semi-finals, and going further into it.
What's the trans one?
So,
What's trans?
That's the off-season. In professional, it's probably having a holiday or getting your shoulders reconstructed or fixing up injuries and things like that. So that's, and some people, and it's probably a good question, the transition, because you've got people that are young guys that really want to work on something. So then, you know, they might have played a couple of first grade games and they're not happy. And they come to you and say, Boyle, mate, I want to get better. I want to get stronger, I want to get bigger, or, you know, the coach has told me about to do this. Let's have 2 weeks off, get a bit of a break, get your body rested and recovered, and then let's start again from there. So it's always got that conversation. And then you've got your big macro cycle, your mesocycles, your microcycles, sessions, and your training units. So, and we've got a template for you when you want to put that together, that first assessment task. And this is a step-by thing. Determine the period's length and the date. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and step 5. And your templates will just have a spreadsheet, and then that's where you probably might need some help with someone being able to help you use the spreadsheet, how to merge cells and.
It's already there. It should be there.
It's all there. Okay. When you look at it, what we want, the volume's normally pretty high, but the intensity starts low. Yeah, like we said last week, if you're going to build a house, you want to do it with a good foundation. Yep. And then the only thing is, when we're looking at speed, you want to build that up, but that's got to start with a low intensity. You can't go flat out because it's a high force generation and stuff. And then what we could look at here is the strength. You might start up with a lot of volume, and as we go up there, we build up the intensity, and then we start doing less reps and more intensity going up with your strength. Yeah? Same as that, we start doing a lot of volume and then start building up that intensity. Does that sound okay? And that's your first transition, second transition, and into your peak into your competition phase. And here's the periodized model for resistance training. It seems complicated, but when you look at your training variables, that's all it is. It's just telling you how to train your variables for hypertrophy, basic strength, and then strength of power, and then you start peaking. And that's just going where your intensity goes from for all those different values. So it's all put into the one slide. Because if we're doing endurance, or we're doing high volume stuff. And if you want to go max strength, we're doing 5 reps, no less than 85%, up to 8%. Yeah, so once the guidelines to limit the training rate have been agreed upon, the sports coach, the unit periodisation plan can be developed. And a method is developed in the program, small-sided games, assign a number of new values, and categorise your activities. So this is where, for an example of, on Mondays, we just run our reps. On Wednesdays, the coach wants to do some technical skills, so we can do 2 blocks. So we do our stuff and periodise it, and then we work with the coaches to do their skills. And that's where you've got the game-based training games and things like that as well. And they'll have their little segment. But we've got to know what they're doing so we can put their loads in. And it's difficult for you guys if you haven't got GPS units. So that's why you need to have a good relationship with your athletes so that the RPEs work, because you're trying to look at their loads as well. And I think you'll see in some of our programs later, every drill that we do tells us how many metres they run and what the GPS load's going to be. So it's hard work, but it builds up and it becomes easier when you're using those spreadsheets, all based on that testing that we do. So this just looks at the guidelines for the distribution of weeks. If you're looking at amateur sports, I don't know, who's got an amateur team you're working at? You're working with the Bulldogs?
Yeah.
When did you start training?
November.
No, what date? Okay,
I'm not
good.
sure. Yeah.
No, we started on
Early,
the 27th
early, yeah.
of November,
Yeah.
because they had the series at the end of the season, so they went up until then, so we've got to have 7 weeks, so we've got to fit that all in. And then we start again after Christmas. So we only had some of them had 4 weeks leading, some only had 3 weeks leading into Christmas, so that's where we went there. And then preparative, so you really need to keep an eye on that as well. So working with your coach there. And then planning the mesocycles, what do you want to achieve that month? And then work with your coaches there. Mesocycles are merely the accumulation of microcycles, and the general planning, less variation than a month with athletes who perform less than 4 days sessions a week. How many days are you working with your pathways? How many days they train?
3 days in the
3 days, okay. Most of you should only work 2 days a week with your amateur athletes and that. So, and then what happens there, you probably get them to do extras if you want. How many days do you train?
Well, I'm having time off at the moment, but I do train 5 days a week.
5 days a week, and you break up your strength and your specific training and your fitness training, or?
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I merge stuff together. Or do like morning and afternoon.
Yeah. Have you got a main coach that you talk to, like builds the whole together?
Yeah.
And are they across your strength and conditioning side of things? Or?
Kind of. I would like them to be more, but sorry.
Yeah, it's really difficult. So yeah, you've really got to work hard with your coach and get to know them. And just when you're planning, you might have 3 basic weeks, and then unload, like the Wellbeing program we talked about last week, or you might have 1 very hard week, plus 2 hard weeks and 1 unload. It's how you want to put that program together. And does that coincide with your running as well as your strength, as well as your skills? So you've got to look at your RPEs and all those different levels and where you want to peak it to. And again, it's trial and error to start off with, but once you get it, or if you've got a mate or someone that knows what's going on, you can use those as help. And that's, I think I drove home last week, it's always good to network. And again, we're all happy to share our information, so if you need any help. And I've given you our program, maybe a little bit too more advanced than you guys, but it's just something you can cut on stuff out of it if you want. But yeah, just to help you through. When you get into the season, it's a little bit different because you might have a 4-day turnaround. If you're playing Sunday to Thursday, or Sunday to Friday, or Sunday to Saturday, or Sunday to Sunday, you've got different turnarounds for your microcycles as well. Yep. So these are all different. You can look at different tapers for them when you start to unload. We've seen that from last week. And here's another tapering period here. And we'll put it all together. So planning a microcycle or a week. So various sessions, so what type, what mode, what volume, what intensity, so the training variables, and no two sessions should be the same. If we go back here, so we've got our framework, so we know that we're doing aerobic conditioning and skills, speed, and then here we know we're doing speed, but we're going to do that agility or quickness, yeah, and we're doing anaerobic conditioning, and you're still doing blocks there on those days. And that's our building up on that capacity there. And there's some variations about when you're at peak. And what would be one of the really important things that we need when we're doing all this for our athletes? So if you've got into a new sport, whether you're rugby union or athletics, who do you work with? How do you know what's a double standard? Who are you going to work with?
Coach.
Coaching, yeah. You've got to work with the coaches, but you've also got to have a good relationship with the players and get that honest feedback and things there as well. Because they're at the coal face. Like I played rugby league for 10 years, but it's a different game now. So I don't know how they're feeling. They're bigger, stronger, faster. Some of those hits that they're going now, I think 62 minutes, the Melbourne Storm and the Penrith game, that was in play for. No, dead in their feet. So it's really interesting. That's why it's always good to network, so that we can talk and understand the game more, and we need to understand the game. So if I was going to coach at Backline, I'd be ringing up mates everywhere, trying to find out, you know, what the prescription would be, what they're used to. So you've got to look at a weekly schedule. This is an example of a pre-season microcycle. What they do on a Monday, what they do on a Tuesday, what they do on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Having a lot of athletes, you've got to have 3 weight sessions. So you're in the gym for 3 hours continuously as well. It's a long day. And that's another example for pre-season. For us, the referees, they're pretty full days. And where everyone's at. So planning a day, general rules. You try to get your strength and power in, speed and agility, and tactical, before endurance training. But that's not set in concrete. And that's not what we do with our guys either. So we actually start in the morning, that's a field session. After they do their field sessions, a minute and 45 minutes before they can do their weight session. And then after that, they'll do a flush or a swim. And then they'll go into their meetings and game reviews and things like that. So again, everything's negotiable with the coach. And also planning with what facilities you have or what you haven't got. So there's a lot of planning that goes on for that. And hopefully, that's all going to happen for you in your swing placement. When you're there for 60 hours, you've got to sort of understand and ask them what they do. How do they plan their periodisation? How do they do this? How do they do what's going on there? Are they following evidence-based practice? And if they're not, can they justify why they're not doing it? You know, we might look at a program and say, wow, that looks a bit weird. But once they explain it, and then when I worked with the Harold Batts and the SG Law, we had 30 guys, and we had the SG Law and the Harold Batts together. So we only had 30 minutes, and we had 4 circles, 4 different quarters that we had to work in. So, you know, we had to fit everything in, strength, and then we had to work our skills out, and then they had to do the conditioning, and then they had to do their other stuff. So it was really tight, and that's what you're going to do before you get in. So here's a field session for our guys, and it's week 18, session 1. What our drill numbers, what our warm-up is, what we actually do, and the responsibilities as soon as we get there. So we've got to check their well-being, the smarter base in the morning, and then we do a pre-field session where they've got to do sit and reach, meter walls and see if they're all okay, just make sure they're not there. Then we've got to look at their soft tissue release, foam rolling. Then we've got to look at some mobility, flexibility, and then some structured activation before they start doing the warm-ups. We might do some games and things like that as another activity, and then start doing different sets. But you can sort of see how many sets, how many reps, what sort of volume that they're doing for each part, how long it's going to take us to finish the session, and then rest and even drink stops. So, yeah, it gets pretty technical. There's just some MAS distances for the athletes where we expect them to be. So monitoring the load in the sports training. Different types of training, you've got your skill, your tactical, and they have their own impact as well as their cumulative impact across the day, the week, the phase of the season. So it's got to be careful. We like our training, we've got to get that variety into it. So we might do MAS Eurofit, and we might do static starts, we might do rolling starts, or we might turn them into a Tabala session, 20 seconds on, only 10 seconds off with static starts. Or we might do long intervals, or we might put games in and things like that. So that we look at a monthly cycle and change it every month. Put some variety to it. And we try to get our coaches to do the same. So let's do that for a while, and then back it off, and then we start something else. When we do Be Tough, with the referees, they've got a lot of emotional loads as well as cognitive loads. They make about 1,000 decisions in a game, and they're under the pump with 2 teams. If the 2 teams don't want to play the rules, they're hard to try to police them all the time. They've got to give away a lot of penalties and try to manage them. And they've got the TV on them to make sure that everything fits in. If they go over the game time, and 2 years ago they went over the game time, went over by 8 minutes, so they didn't know whether the referee was going to get thrown under the bus or it was a good game of football. And that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So they're under a fair bit of cognitive pressure. So sometimes we have Be Tough sessions where they'll be doing their MAS runs every 15 seconds, and they get a little script that you've got to remember. And after they do 4 minutes of MAS and 8 breaks, then they've got to tell them what the score was, who won the game, and different things like that under loads. So it becomes really interesting. Certainly part of what they've got to do. Cool. So how do you monitor loads? And again, it's really important that we get those RPEs, especially to see where they're at. The other thing we might challenge them is what? They might give us an RPE of 6, but when we look at them, what are they looking like? They look like dog shit. What's going on? And then you've got to ask that question. You know, I had a late night, or something happened, something's happened at home, I couldn't get any sleep. So, yeah, we just try to keep that honesty. Talk at their loads. If they're pre-wellbeing, they need a wall, or their sit and reach was down, you know, can we afford to sprint it? Maybe not. So they're the sort of things that you're looking at all the time. If you've got Latrell Mitchell, 1.2 million, 2.5 million, if you're over in the EPL and you've got a player that's worth about 70 million, and you let them run and then you get flagged for a hamstring tightness, and you're going to get the sack. So it's really important that we understand that. And the easiest way to understand that is to have that good relationship with them. And we need to understand it. So there's just some different ways of monitoring the loads. And that's where we look at this external and internal load monitoring. So you've got your objective, subjective, observational data. Where do we use it? Those functional movement screens that we used last week, we talked about and we went through. Really important that you'll notice that these have got a high correlation with what we do in the gym. So we're looking at their technique all the time. And that's where we're picking up some asymmetries. And again, when they're in the gym, when you start their muscle, when we're screening, our assessment, when do we start it? As soon as they walk in the gate, how you feeling? You feel okay?
Yeah.
You happy?
Yeah.
Tell your face. That's better. So if they start off with a smile, then, and it's really important to try to keep that way, because it doesn't matter who you are and how much money you get. When you go to training, what do you want? Well, have fun now. So we try to keep that up to the environment. So that's that daily wellness smarter base. These blank ones that they haven't filled in, so we're trying to keep them honest with us and keep them filling in. So they fill out daily scores on sleep, mood, injury, fatigue, motivation, and we'll just keep checking it up. So on the way out today, we had 3 flags. So I've sent out text to them and said they're doing okay as well to try and get that description. That's that pre-field screening before we go out. We're doing all these different things, and in the smarter base, it's got what their normal average level is, if there's any discrepancies. So they flag and get them on the phone and just check and see if they're okay as well. Here's some GPS monitoring reports for their loads, how you sort of put it together. This was we were at the Panthers, I think, and they break it down into every 10-minute blocks to see where they're at, where they're getting fatigued. And they're looking at their speeds, their accels, decels, high speed running, just to make it nice and simple so that the coaches can see if there's any flags or somewhere where we need to work. Now, RPEs, everybody knows about the rating. 1 to 10 times it by the time you're under training. And just some of the challenges, not problems. We only face challenges. We solve challenges. RPLAs are governed by culture and honesty, and S&C coaches should not be obsessed by them. It's just a signal to a conversation at the start. I noticed RPE was, the wellness wasn't good this morning, how you doing? And they appreciate you asking. We did talk about velocity-based training, and next week we're trying to get the gym aware, but these are the zones, and we talked about velocities of speed, whether we're going to do starting strength speed, and some sort of velocities. But when you're working with athletes, it goes back to the central nervous system. So if someone's fatigued and they're not getting their velocity out, is it good from the continued training, or do we give them a rest? And that's where it's really important that we, well, if we possibly can, some form of velocity-based training to understand where they're at. And you have a visual look. Even last week when we were trying to do that snatch, you know, whether we were actually using our lower body or our upper body, we're not going to beat the power that our glutes and quads can develop. So if we're doing upright rows and reverse curls, it's going to, you can see where it's going slow. But when we want to lift, remember, we're going to lift with intent. Are you going to tackle somebody at 50%? Or are you going to block somebody at 50%? You're going to jump at 50% on the hurdles or something like that? And I think the answer's no. Okay. And just that comparison with weekly load on the strain. And there's some stuff on the acute versus chronic workloads. We talk about the acute chronic workloads. Anybody work in that area, in that sphere? Sports science? You do? Where do you work at with it? Do you work with it? The acute chronic load? Oh, you're talking to someone. Okay. So Billy Hullen did a study, and it comes up with 1.5 to 0.8. So we've got to keep that rolling average in between those two levels. So if you're doing distances every week, and all of a sudden you've got a week off and you come here, and then we're going into this week, or even down here, and you go into that week and you haven't run, what's the chances of getting injured? Pretty high. So it's really important that we know that we give them that dose all the time. Again, you've got to monitor to make sure that they've hit high speed, 20% high speed, at least once every 10 days. And that's just some of the conclusions of it. A lot of conclusions. Okay, thanks very much. Any questions?
What's the many exercises you keep away from or do less of in season compared to outside of season? Like deadlifts, for example.
What exercises?
Like, yeah. Are there any-
Referees, I tried to do, yesterday, I wanted to do some change of direction.
Yeah.
And then, and all it was is just putting two poles there, and then they just had to run through that pole, like, and I got pulled off on my conditioning coach, because referees don't step so much like that,
Yeah.
and not to do anything, get off the ground, because the referees are 38 years old, they don't practice it.
What about in the gym? What?
We were doing strong, so we encouraged them to get stronger. And
Yeah.
a couple of the guys, they're not all 39, they've got some 24-year-olds and things like that. And they lifted really heavy, but it was making them feel really sluggish. And one of the guys, Peter Goff, he's done his sports science degree, and he just said that he's feeling a lot better now because he's not lifting heavy. And is it a requirement for a referee to be heavy? So what we want is functional movements and gradual movement. And even, I met with the other guys last week, the guy at the Dragons, he had one of his guys doing 232 kilo squats. But I said, are we doing it wrong? You know, do they have to be that strong? He said, no. He said, we've dropped him back to 82%. His 1.2 is a lot better. So we're learning all the time about what to do. And the coach, Wayne Bennett, just says he's too slow, he's too fat. And I don't get a piece of paper to say someone's not happy because I can see it on their face. So it's really, those casual conversations are really important.
I just wonder how many of you understand the total training loads that was a few slides ago, the internal RPE and the total time in the gym and that weekly load. Do you guys actually remember what that means, or did that go over some people's head and they're too scared to ask? Just a conversation.
So normally our active weight circuit or strength session is 45 minutes. So if they do their RPE, that'll be, might be 8, might be 7, might be 8. So 8 times 5 is 40, 8 4 is 32, and 4 is 37. That's their RPE for that session.
That's just for one session, and then we do that for every session in the week. Some of you might know that, some of you may
And every session in the day.
don't. Yeah.
So, yeah, no, that's a really good point. So, a lot of our conditioning, that program was about 1 hour that they had. So that might be 8 or 9 for 60 minutes. That's for the field session. And then they might have this for the strength session, 45. And then they might have a swim. The swim might last 25 minutes. And that might be an 8. That's a flush, but it's off-legs conditioning. 25. So they're all added up, and that's for the day. And then every day they'll do something. Our guys will do extra sessions, and we encourage them to put it in the smarter base. So we want to know their loads, and that's where their overall loads, and we get that, what they call that training stress balance for the week. And we want to make sure that if they get injured, if you haven't measured it, what happens? If you don't know what they've done, we can't find out what could have caused it. So, you know, that's where it's really important, especially when, you know, it becomes business. If you lose your best player, then it's going to cost you. And the coaches are going to be happy with it. So there's no staying in the That's where, we don't clock off. We're getting messages at 6 o'clock in the morning and we're getting them at 10 o'clock at night. Just to make sure that if you have any questions or, yeah.